So recently, just a couple days ago, I went on a super cool podcast with the Zachary Horton Foundation. Jim Horton, who is the founder and Zach's dad, is back with us today. This is so funny because you interviewed me.
That's right.
And it's so funny. I'm always nervous when I go on other people's shows. I could do this all day long, and it's just like riding a bike, but...
And I got to say, you were a great guest.
Thank you.
Yeah, and you make hosting someone very easy too, because you don't mind talking.
I know. I talk too much. My wife's always saying, "Shut up." But hey, that's okay. So yeah, that podcast. Take a listen. It's going to be out in a couple weeks.
That's right.
We'll keep you posted on that. But I wanted to invite Jim back today because I wanted to bring up the discussion that we had, harm reduction. It's something that is being talked about right now in the recovery community, people struggling with drug or alcohol addiction. And real quick, for our viewers that don't know what the Zachary Horton Foundation is, can you just give them a background, then we'll talk about harm reduction?
Sure, and the Zachary Horton Foundation was developed after my son passed away from an accidental overdose, a year ago last January. And the mission of the foundation, as you know, Austin, is to eliminate the stigma of addiction. And and we do that by bringing love, hope, and acceptance to people who suffer from the disease of addiction. And that's to the families as well as to the individuals that are suffering from the disease. And it's just so important that people see themselves as more than what their addiction is, and that we begin to teach other people that as well.
Yeah, have that conversation. Harm reduction. You have been keeping a close eye on this term, especially in the last week. What's going on?
Yeah, and it really speaks to the essence of eliminating the stigma. I was part of a conference that took place this weekend called Mobilize Recovery. If anyone interested in the recovery community, please Google that. And it's just amazing. It's a lot of grassroots individuals and organizations that are coming together and combating the disease of addiction and working with recovery. The essence of harm reduction, Austin, is that we reduce the harm that's happening through addiction, through drug and alcohol abuse. So in the past, where we would say the way that you solve addiction is by abstinence only, and that was it. You go to a 12-step program. Once you're an addict, you're always an addict. If you use once, you relapse. Your date starts all over again. You know, you're no longer in recovery. Harm reduction talks about making incremental steps toward that recovery, and in the greatest sense of how I think it could have affected my son is. Had I been able to employ some of these strategies, let's just keep him alive until he's able to enter recovery on his terms and to the fullest extent where he accepts it and embraces it. And, you know, again, he was 19 years old. His mind wasn't even, and he probably had the mind of a 15-year-old. They often say when people start using, that's really where their emotional a growth and maturity ends. And he started at probably 15 or 16 using pretty heavily. So that's probably his age. He was 15 or 16 years old. To ask him to think about never using again, he couldn't even conceive that. Never being able to smoke a joint again with his friends, never being able to have a drink again was probably more than he could. So where I really feel like I failed him, and I give myself some breaks on this now because you can only do what you know how to do. But where I felt him, instead of celebrating the successes that he had of 30 and 45 days sober at a time, in the 9 months from when he went into treatment till when he died, in that 9-month period, instead of using every day, he was using once a month, once every 45 days. Instead of celebrating that and building upon those successes, I was towing that line of tough love, not just setting boundaries, which is absolutely necessary, right? But it wasn't that. But I was still in the punishment mode in my mind, and so that's a discussion that. And again, I'm brand new to this. I'm not saying that I'm right about it. I really don't even know what's right and what's wrong. What I'm trying to do is just start the discussion about it and get more people to think about what it would look like if we look to reduce the harm of drug and alcohol addiction instead of just punishing it.
That's right.
You know, I have a long history in my background. I was studying for the ministry when I was just a young man, and again, my religious thoughts are separate and different now, and that's another story. But I still think of things in terms of biblical stories and Scripture, because when you do something for your whole youth, it stays with you.
Yeah.
That's right. Which, by the way, is why we still want to punish. We still want to punish people who suffer from the disease of addiction, because that's kind of what's worked. The war on drugs wasn't a war on drugs; it was a war against the drug user. It was against the person trying to get the medicine to get better. That's who we fought the war against, right? And so those are the ones who are in prison, right? Still some today. Now, some of that is changing, but again, back to my biblical story. I was thinking, and I looked up this passage last night. Just remember that I could get it right. And there was the lady caught in adultery, and she was brought before Christ, as the story goes. Was brought before Jesus, and that's a famous passage where he says, you without sin cast the first stone, and slowly everyone began to disappear. And he looked at the lady. And he said to her, well, where are your accusers? He says, well, Lord, I have none. And then he said, then neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more. And I thought to myself, if 30, 45, 60 days later, they had brought her back and said, hey, this lady was seen standing around some other men that aren't her husband. My guess is Jesus would have said, go and sin no more. And I think that that's the message that we need to bring to people suffering with the disease of addiction. It's not that there's not going to be a slip. We got to get this concept out of our minds and somehow reach out to them and say, man, I understand how hard this is. Dude, especially you're coming to sit down at my table and I'm still having a glass of wine every night, and I'm telling you not to, you know what? Hey, you slipped up last week. You know what? Let's get you help, and so we can do about go and sin no more. Right. And when it happens the next time, you know what I'm going to say? Go and sin no more.
Well, because it doesn't help somebody that is struggling. This is, addiction is a disease, period, and it is the hardest thing to conquer for many, many people. And, I'm addicted to freaking Gatorade. I'm addicted to Rockstar. And it's hard for me to get off these, and I've had my own struggles as well with other stuff. So it's... addiction is it's tough. It ain't easy.
No.
So, and to be like, oh, shame on you, shame on you, shame on you. I think it's good to have this conversation.
Yeah. And that's, again, the whole concept of shame and guilt, I don't think produces the type of results. You know what? That may work for someone who's not an addict, whose disease hasn't progressed that far, right?
Yeah.
But after it has, the shame, and that's just something that makes the whole journey for them seem even more insurmountable.
Yeah, because
right?
they look down on themselves, they're mad at themselves, and then they're like, well, screw it, I'll just use again.
And how about instead of that, we search for options. We do our best, and I know that there's a lot of treatment facilities now that are working at showing people a different way to live, right? Here's something that you can do. It's not just getting you sober for 30 days and shipping you back to the same home, the same environment. The friends that are still in your phone, guess what? They're the friends that you used with before, right? That treatment in the beginning is just to stabilize you, right? Now we've got to give people going back in the community a place where they can excel and function. And I think it's even got to be more than than 90 meetings in 90 days. I think it's got to be more than that. It's got to be how do we work with them. And I think before, and I know this is the first time that Zach went through his medical detox and he got home, I remember my wife and I talking and just saying, wow, we really dodged a big one there. Everything's going to be all right now.
Yeah.
And I think that's especially in the opioid crisis, and that was Zach's obsession was opioids. It's a different animal. Heroin is a different animal.
Yeah, right.
Than alcohol.
Right.
It's a different beast, and again, I don't have the answers to it yet. I'm really hopeful with new legislation, with more government funds coming in, that we can do the studies, we can collect the data, and we can figure out better ways. But a lot of that is people being open to seeing it and not looking at it through the same lens that they always looked at it before.
The other thing I want to talk about is you do a lot of speaking engagements, especially these days, and you have one tonight.
I do. I have one tonight, and that part is growing, especially I think now that COVID restrictions, or at least we know how to navigate through it. That's making it easier. Yeah. So I'll be going to Fresno State tonight, and I'm speaking to a grief class. When Len and I lost Zach, we reached out to Hines Hospice, and they are just I got to give them a plug. They're just phenomenal at helping people work through and navigate waters that they never thought that they'd ever have to be in. And so our grief counselor, Kathy Cromwell, is also a professor at Fresno State, and she's invited me to come and speak. And I spoke for her last year, and it's to her class of a lot of students who are going to become therapists and become counselors, and some that are just interested in the field. And so I'm going to go in tonight and talk about my grief journey, which, obviously the core of that is also about the awareness, the awareness of that I'm trying to bring about the stigma of addiction, and just how that all meets and how that comes. So I'm looking forward to that.
People can learn more about the Zachary Horton Foundation online, zacharyhortonfoundation.org. And if somebody watching today or on our replay, they're thinking, hey, I'd love for you to talk to my group, can they just give you a call? Or
Absolutely. We're happy to reach out. And also, if you see something on the website that you have more questions about, never hesitate to call. My wife and I are always available to run through. So, sometimes you just believe that no one else is going to understand where you're at, and unfortunately, we understand too well. But again, we're happy to share, that hope with you, and again, the prayer would be that we can make a difference for you.
And if you folks want to check out our podcast, again, it's going to be airing in a couple weeks. You find a lot of details about me, some personal stories. So
yeah, and that's the name of that's under Zach's story.
Zach's story.
Zach's life, a story of love, addiction, loss, grief, and recovery.
And that's on what?
You can get that. You can find it on Spotify. Okay. You can find it on Anchor.fm, or you can go to the website, and you can click on the next episode right there on the website, and you have links to all the episodes as well.
Easy peasy. I'll see you next time.
Thank you so much, Austin. I appreciate it.
My pleasure, Jim. Thank you. I'm Austin Reed. You're watching Central Valley Talk. We'll be back in just a bit.